Hello, I'm Kellie Marksberry, Executive Director of the American Institute of Stress. Welcome to the AIS Spotlight. Today I'm visiting with Mr. James Porter, who is President of StressStop.com, which, along with its parent company, AudioVision, has produced stress management videos for over 20 years. Mr. Porter has written, directed, edited, and produced over 20 stress management videos, and has written hundreds of articles, workbooks, and stress management audio programs as well. Mr. Porter's videos have won numerous awards, including first and second place at the International Medical Film Festival, the American Journal of Nursing Media Festival, and the Biomedical Film Festival. Mr. Porter's films are shown across the United States in thousands of clinics and hospitals, including the Mayo Clinic, the Cleveland Clinic, Mass General Hospital, and the Columbia Cornell Medical Center. Mr. Porter is also a stress management speaker and has presented lectures to West Point, the Navy, the Department of Homeland Security, and many others. His work has been reported on a wide variety of media outlets, including Good Morning America, the Lady Home Journal, the Daily News, the Dallas Morning News, and in medical journals as well, such as the Journal of Biocommunication, the Journal of Cardiopulmonary Rehabilitation, and the Journal of Family Medicine. Mr. Porter's newest book, Stop Stress This Minute, won the 2012 Silver Award from the National Health Information Association. This morning, I interviewed Mr. Porter, and we had a little bit of technical difficulty in that his video feed was the only one that was recorded, which is the most important part anyway. So let's check in with Mr. Porter and see what he has to say. Welcome, Mr. Porter. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thanks for asking, Kelly.
I'm so glad you could be with us. I just rattled off a long list of awards and accomplishments and books and lecture series and all kinds of things that you're doing, this long background in video production, and so you're a busy guy. I'm glad we got you here for a few minutes.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
I notice all your work is centered on stress management, and so I'm just wondering if you can, talk to us a little bit. In preparing for this interview, I looked around your website and read some of your blogs, and last year you wrote one titled, You Teach What You Most Need to Learn. I thought that was very interesting and appropriate, and can you talk to me about that, how you came to this health and stress connection, this realization of that, and how did you get into the stress business?
Well, that's a really good question, Kelly. And it all started back in 1984 when I created a program called the Relaxation Tape. Back then, there wasn't a category of programs called relaxation tapes. So apparently I started one. And this was an unusual program because it combined beautiful shots of nature, video, along with soothing music, environmental sounds, and a narrator guiding people through standard relaxation techniques like deep breathing and progressive muscle relaxation. So we called the program the Relaxation Tape. I remember I invited a local newspaper reporter to come interview me about the tape, and I told her that I was probably the only producer that was in the United States that was proud of the fact when people fell asleep watching his program, because people got really relaxed and fell asleep watching it. And that story got picked up by the AP, and I guess the rest is history. That launched the business. VA medical centers and hospitals started buying the tape for their closed circuit TV systems. And I immediately became a kind of a B2B business. And I always have been, creating programs that help people learn how to manage stress. And I sell them to businesses to redistribute to their clients.
Yes, and this website, Stress Stop, is amazing. And, most of our members know now, we're partnering together to offer Stress Stop products through the marketplace, and we're thrilled
about that. I mean, I'm so excited. We're working on that right now. Within the next month or so, we'll be off and rolling there. You know, what is the goal and focus of your work? Do you have a specific aspect of stress management that you focus on with Stress Stop and with everything that you do, or is it more of a just broad, all-encompassing kind of focus that you have with stress management?
Well, the way I started was I kind of started looking at physical techniques, like what I talked about in that relaxation video, teaching people deep breathing, teaching people that they should do yoga and exercise. So that was kind of the period of like the first 10 years of my business. I was just teaching people standard relaxation techniques. And then I got into cognitive techniques, changing the way you're thinking affects your experience of stress. I got into the work of Albert Ellis and Aaron Beck. And I really infused my products with a lot of business around CBT and understanding really how your thinking can really make you miserable at times. And one of the great things about cognitive restructuring or changing the way you think about a stressful situation is you can use it while your stress is actually happening, which is not really true. You can't meditate in the middle of an argument with your spouse, for example. So I really like the cognitive approach, and a lot of my products used that as the central focus for the next 10 years of my business. I've been in business now 30 years. And then the last 10 years, about 10 years ago, the Army asked me to do a program on mindfulness at their annual health convention. And I really found that that solved a little problem that I'd been starting to notice about cognitive restructuring, which is that sometimes, the theory of cognitive restructuring is once you realize you're having an irrational thought, you just change it. But what I also realize is there are times where no matter how hard you try, you can't change it. And mindfulness allows you to get just a little kind of disconnected from that irrational thought so that you realize it's not you, that there's an awareness below the level of thinking that kind of keeps you free and clear of certain irrational thinking patterns that you can't free yourself of. And by just cultivating this awareness below the level of thinking, you really do free yourself from these patterns, or at least you recognize them when they're operating inside of you. So that was the next step, and that's kind of where I see the future of my products going.
Right. Well, kind of along those lines, I got to talk about your new book, Stop Stress This Minute. Really, it's more of a workbook, kind of a daily diary almost. Tell me about this book more specifically.
Well, when I got into writing this book, I was asked to write it for an outfit called Wellcoa, and they distribute the book throughout the United States. You can get it on my website as well. And I really wanted to kind of coalesce a lot of different people's work, like James Prochaska's work on behavioral change, for example, even a little bit of Stephen Covey with time management, and of course the work that I referred to earlier with Albert Ellis and Aaron Beck of the cognitive restructuring. So I took a little piece of everybody's pie and sliced it into this book and made a whole new pie that's kind of multi-flavored, very eclectic. So I'm very proud of the fact that, it's nobody's kind of, I really put together a lot of different ways of managing stress, even included a piece on problem solving in there that gives you a lot of different ways to manage your stress. But the thing that I like that I introduced into this book was this 0 to 10 stress measuring system that you just basically can use at any time during the day to sort of take your stress temperature, to see how you're doing at any given point during the day. And 0 would be total lack of stress or tension, and 10 would be a near panic attack. So we're all operating somewhere probably between a 2 and an 8, let's say. So you just sort of make a conscious note of where you think you are at any point during the day. And if you get up to a 5 or a 6, I teach in the book simple relaxation techniques to get yourself back below a 5.
Yes, they're wonderful, short, bite-sized snippets of information that people can quickly absorb and incorporate into their daily lives. People are busy, they're sitting at their desk at work, and they can do some of these things, and no one will be the wiser. So it's a fantastic book, and I hope that maybe we can get some and offer them through the Institute as well, as another source for that.
Oh, absolutely. That'd be great.
Yeah, I think it'd be perfect.
We just made a deal, Kelly.
Yeah, right. Hold me to it.
Ah.
Well, let's talk about workplace stress for a minute. In some of your writings, you posed a very interesting question. You said, is job stress a problem for a worker, or is it a problem for the company to solve? That's an excellent question. What do you think?
I came across that question when I was trying to start up an organization that started in Europe called ISMA, the International Society for Stress Management, or the International Stress Management Association.
Yes.
And it's going very strong in Europe, but really couldn't even, actually tried to start it with Dr. Paul Roche, who is one of the founders of the American Institute of Stress. And it's the reason it's going strong in Europe is because they have a real support for teaching stress management in corporations that we don't have here in the United States. And unfortunately, I think the corporate viewpoint of stress here in the United States is kind of keep it at arm's length. There's liability issues when you're talking about job stress, and we don't want to get ourselves in any trouble. In Europe, they take responsibility. I mean, we know, you and I know, that job stress is probably the #1 source of stress.
It is.
In this country, #1. Yeah. There you go. And yet, I guess because of liability issues, American business doesn't want to kind of agree with that position. So they sort of give people little bits of help with stress management, but don't really take responsibility for helping people manage stress in the way that European companies do. So we do have a model that we can aspire to, but for now, I think we just have to accept where we are and keep the needle moving forward.
Yeah, right. And give people tools that they can, like this book that you've written here, that they can easily grasp the concepts and incorporate these steps into their lives. And then hopefully we can also educate these corporations to step in and step up and do more and offer more programs and incentives. This brings me to a kind of a hot topic. I know you recently attended a small conference where this issue of incentivizing health programs was tackled head on. There were people there on one side of the fence that say, incentivizing health in the workplace is fantastic. It keeps people motivated. That lets people, participate in certain activities and earn points, or kind of buy more time off and this kind of thing. And then you've got people on the other side of the fence that say, no, incentives don't work. As soon as the incentives stop, people's motivation will stop. So where do you fall on that topic? What do you think about that? What did you pick up from that conference?
Well, the first thing is that Michael Roizen, the head of wellness for Cleveland Clinic, got up and gave a speech about how they give a $2,000 incentive every year. Yeah.
That's a pretty good incentive.
Yeah. Pretty amazing. $2,000 to people, employees, any employee qualifies who meet certain objectives. And they're sort of the ultimate objective of no smoking and certain dietary objectives, certain weight objectives. But they even give the 2,000 out to people who make progress toward those objectives. So, it's a very liberal program in terms of what it does. But, I always sort of think, well, what happens when you leave the Cleveland Clinic, or, what happens when the incentives stop?
Right.
And so ultimately, I think these incentives need to be intrinsic. They need to be, you do them because it feels good to do them. So I really do have to come down on the side of teaching people how to be self-motivated and doing things because it feels good. And I tell, in my book, actually, I think it's the 9th chapter, where I talk about, for me, exercising, which is my number one way to manage stress, is something like, for me, it's like brushing my teeth or taking a shower. I just wouldn't feel right if I didn't do it.
I
So
wouldn't feel
that's,
right either if you
yeah.
didn't brush your teeth.
Right, right. So if you can imagine how you'd feel if you didn't brush your teeth, that's how I feel if I go 2 days without exercise. I'm so crabby and grumpy. I don't even want to be around myself. So, getting to the point where, being organized, getting exercise, even meditating, where you really notice the difference when you don't do it. That's when you've really incorporated these things and are motivated intrinsically to do them.
Right, right. And teaching people, this ban on smoking and weight loss and all these things, to think about why they're wanting to pick up a cheeseburger or why they're needing to pick up that cigarette. Not so much about that they are doing it, but why, and getting to the root of that. That's what we work on a lot around here. That's our mission, is to educate people and make them become more aware, of what's going on in their lives so they can start to fix the things that aren't working.
Right. And learning how to manage stress is really important where that's concerned. And if you talk to a guy like James Prochaska, who's considered the world's foremost authority on behavior change, he'll tell you if you're not managing stress, you're not able to do it. Even Michael Roizen said, don't wait till the end to talk about stress management like we did. And he's referring to his series of books that he wrote with Dr. Oz. Stress management, everybody's realizing the importance of it. And Prochaska also says the number one reason why people relapse is because of stress. So we really need to start with stress management, and the rest of the process of behavioral change is going to come a lot
Right.
easier when you
Fall in
handle
line.
that part of the puzzle first.
Right, right. Well, there's a lot of talk these days of stress management, PTSD therapies. There's been some horrific news stories lately with the tornadoes and the hurricanes. And, I know you're sitting there in Connecticut right in the path of Hurricane Sandy, and some other horrific events that have gone on there in your home state. Every time I talk to fellows about these things, these news stories as they come out, there's this new term that keeps popping up. I'm sure you've heard it. It's post-traumatic growth. You've been through this personally with Hurricane Sandy. I'm sure that there were some new stresses that popped up in your life and some, to put it mildly, inconveniences to you and your family. What do you think about this concept of post-traumatic growth?
I think it's a very interesting one. There's a lot to say. I actually first encountered it quite recently at there was a conference called the Trauma, Stress, and Coping. It was in Baltimore, I believe, back in the early winter, I think February. And they were talking about it there. And it's a really interesting concept. Now, when we look at trauma, we know that 80 to 90% of people survive traumatic events without any long-term consequences. So what does that mean, and what's happening in the cases of people that do? Well, I sort of refer to Daniel Siegel's work. He's a psychologist from UCLA, and he talks about making sense of traumatic memories. And the people who are able to make sense of their traumatic memories, maybe they realize that their father was an alcoholic and their father's father was an alcoholic. And whenever you look back on a traumatic memory and then you restore it back in your memory, you're changing it a little bit. So when you're able to make sense of those memories, I think you're able to achieve traumatic growth, post-traumatic growth. So that's kind of my opinion about it. I think it's really a very interesting phenomenon, and I want to learn more about it.
Yeah, definitely. If people can go through these horrific events and learn coping skills and stress management skills and come out on the other side more resilient, which is another hot topic word these days, I think that, there may be something there, and people are very resilient. I mean, I'm a Texan, and we have tornadoes coming through weekly. Tornadoes, yeah, and it's just become a way of life. And yes, it is stressful, but you get through it, you move on.
There you go.
So right, I think that people are definitely, they can grow from it if they take that extra time to think about what they've been through and get the appropriate help and therapies and interventions if they need it.
Yes,
Yeah. So you wear a lot of hats. You know,
I do.
you're running this very successful business. You're, producing lecture series and writing books. Does anything stress you out?
Yeah, there are a few things that stress me out actually. I'm very stress sensitive, and I'm looking at that as an issue for maybe stress management down the line. I think people don't look at that enough. I think I was born with a little bit of anxiety in the family. My mother was definitely had suffered from some stress related conditions. So, I think I inherited a sort of propensity toward being sensitive to environmental stimuli. And I'd say that if I had to mention one thing, I'd say it was noise, backup beepers, planes flying overhead. So that's the kind of thing that will get to me.
That's really interesting. Backup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have something. So that's,
Yeah.
and I remember when there was no backup, when there were no backup beepers. And I realized that we need those for the people that are working in those areas where trucks are backing up. But do we really need to hear them from miles away?
Yeah, right.
That's my question. And I've actually looked online, and there are ways of making the beep be more localized. And what they say is that once you start working in an environment like that, you just block out the
You don't even
beeping
hear
because
it.
it's all over the place. It
Yeah.
could be from trucks coming from all different directions. So the very people that it's meant to save, sometimes it doesn't actually help. So just putting that out there. Who knows where it might go? One of the solutions, though, I'm really finding to that kind of thing where you're sensitive to stress or overly sensitive to a particular aspect of stress, I think meditation is the solution for that, because you're restructuring your brain in a very real way through meditation practice. So I've noticed that I'm able to make myself less sensitive to some of these things with my meditation practice.
Okay, well, here's a little bit of a loaded question because I know that you regularly practice yoga, and I've got some pretty impressive pictures to prove it that I might just show here in a second. They're really great. You're amazing. So
I think you're referring to my Pincha Mayurasana pictures.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not quite ready for the cover of Yoga Journal, but I'm getting there.
I'm telling you, they're impressive. So what's your personal strategy for stress management? You got any favorite techniques, tools?
Yes, thanks for asking. I do definitely do yoga. I do it 3 or 4 times a week. I did it this morning. But I got to say, my number one technique is vigorous exercise, because I think it's the endorphin rush that you get after you do vigorous exercise. The recommendation used to be for aerobic exercise 3 times a week. And the reason they changed that to 30 minutes of light exercise 6 to 7 times a week was because nobody was doing the aerobic exercise. So it's not that it didn't work. It's not that it wasn't actually a little bit better. It's just that nobody was doing it. And so I think you get a stress benefit from the aerobic exercise that you don't get from regular exercise. Of course, we have to make the caveat that if you're not a regular exerciser right now, you want to do it gradually, talk to your doctor before you start up a campaign of exercise. But,
right.
I've been doing it for years. So I got to tell you, I get on a stationary bike for 30 minutes. I try to do that 5 days a week. And there is it's a little gross, but there's a puddle of sweat below that bike when I'm done. And people don't even want to get near me when I walk away from that bike. And I have to do a major cleanup job at the Y, or I'm going to lose my membership, because they don't like what I do to that bike. But I get a lot of my stress out. And then, by the way, I observed a very important rule, and that's the stress management cool down, cooling down after the aerobic exercise. So that's a key part of the whole process. So there's a pool at my Y. So after I'm done on the bike, I jump in the pool And let me tell you something, I walk out of that Y feeling so relaxed every day. I start each day at a 0 or a 1. And I know that stress to some extent is cumulative. So as my stress increases throughout the day, I'm starting at a much lower set point than other
Right.
people who might start at a 3 or a 4.
Oh, that's an excellent point. That makes me want to go get in a run. That's a great point.
Yeah, it really makes a difference.
Yes, definitely. What inspired you to start all of this? Who inspires your work every day?
Well, uh, I I get inspiration from historical figures like Abraham Lincoln, who suffered from depression his whole life and yet still managed to accomplish so much, and or a person like Gandhi, who said, be the change you want to see in the world. I can't think of anybody I'd rather emulate than somebody like that who had so little. I actually took a trip to India in January and got to see his ashram, and you see he lived so simply, and yet with nothing but the power of thought, he managed to change the whole world.
That's amazing. That's wonderful. What drew you to AIS? I mean, you're kind of born with this stress sensitivity, and through your life, you've centered your work around helping yourself and helping others manage their stress. And you've been a fellow at AIS for many, many years. What drew you to our program and our mission?
When I knew we were going to do this interview, I was kind of racking my brain, like, when did I first get a hold of, and it was Dr. Roche, of course, who was the former president, and I guess he's the president emeritus.
Chairman. Yep.
Oh, chairman. Okay, that's his title now. Just a great guy, and of course a disciple of Hans Selye, who's the originator of the stress concept. So yeah, just every story he's ever told me about Hans Selye has been fascinating to me. But I think this is how I got a hold of him the first time. Is I think I read an article that was like a Time magazine article about stress back in the early 80s. And he was quoted as an expert on stress. And I think it gave the name of the organization, that it was in Yonkers, New York at the time. And I think I looked it up in the phone book. And I called, because there was no Google or anything like that. And I called him up, and he really took me under his wing and showed me what I was doing right, showed me what I was doing wrong, and really taught me so much about, one of the things I remember he taught me really early on was to use the word may or can. Rather than stress causes this problem or that problem, stress may cause this problem or that problem. And it was a key thing that he taught me about writing and really how to position stress, because you never want to say that it absolutely causes this or that.
Right, and everyone responds so differently, and yes, definitely.
Right.
Definitely.
So over the years, I just want to say about AIS that it's really, I think you guys are doing a great job in sort of identifying what's good in the world of stress and what maybe is not so good. Because there's a lot of quackery out there, unfortunately, when it comes to teaching stress management. And so I think the role of AIS as kind of the ombudsman to show who are the good people out there that are teaching stress management, what are the good products, that's a really vital role that we're going to need now and in the coming years.
Absolutely.
And by the way, one last thing about the fellow, I've had that on my resume for years, and people comment on it, and it's really meant a lot to me.
Oh, well, it means a lot for us to have you, and the fellows are really what make AIS what it is. It's you guys that we call upon to sort of vet all of these new programs that are coming out. And stress management is a big business, and there are a lot, like you said, a lot of things out there that don't work, cost a lot of money, and trick people. And so we really rely heavily on your scientific expertise, and you've been around this old block a time or two, so it really adds a personal aspect even to what we do. And that's kind of the point of even this spotlight interview, is to show people that yes, our fellows are heavily credentialed, they're experts in their field, they're elite physicians, researchers, business people, but they're also everyday people dealing with stress in their lives and kind of working their way through it too. So really kind of a personal glimpse at a very serious problem.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, we're not trying to eliminate all stress. We're just trying to learn how to kind of ride the wave of stress. So
Right.
kind of like a surfer rides a wave. So you're in control, yeah, in control of the energy, and using it to your own purposes.
Yes. Well, what do you think is the next step? What do you see as the future of stress management?
That's a really good question. And I think Heidi Hanna has some of the answers in her book, which I really like. I've just gotten a copy of it, which you so kindly sent me, and I really think it's a good book. And what she's captured, which I really do believe is the future of stress management, is this idea that we've kind of moved from the physiological era, which was the cellular era, where stress was kind of a plumbing problem, to the psychological era, where it was kind of a thinking problem, now to the neurological era, where it's a wiring problem. And I think brain science is really, and meditation are kind of the 2 points on which I hang the future of meditation. There's a really good book I've got a copy of right here. It's called The Emotional Life of Your Brain by Richard Davison. And his research at the University of Wisconsin-Madison has shown us with his brain scans exactly what's going on in the brains of meditators. And we're seeing that the brain actually does change as a result of an 8-week course in mindfulness, for example. So there's some exciting new directions that we're going in. And I think I saw on a slide at that conference we were just talking about that something like 95% of what we know about the brain, or even 95% of what we know about the brain, is stuff we've learned in the last 5 years as the
Yes.
result of being able to see, really literally see what's going on inside the brain with this MRI machine. So that's a very exciting era that we're heading into. And we now know that the stress response starts in the brain, in the amygdala. So knowing what goes on inside there is giving us a whole new look. And I think we're going to find new strategies. And I think that one thing that's going to come of all of this is that meditation is no longer going to be an option, because we're going to see that it's so valuable for actually restructuring our brain that people are all going to want to do it, whether it's difficult to do or not. I think people are going to want to do it just because of how valuable it is.
Right, exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to visit with me here and share a little of your insights. You've been out in the world and doing this for quite some time, and your feedback is very valuable to us. And I think that even your life experiences and talking about that a little bit will help people. So I appreciate your time and who you are and what you can bring to the Institute. So I have one final question. It's a little bit difficult because I put a requirement on it that you can only answer it in one sentence. So you can take a minute and think about it. James Porter, who are you?
Well, I would say that I'm a householder. And a householder is a term that's used in India to describe a person who isn't a monk, but somebody who's trying to live a more enlightened life, let's say, but is doing so in the world. He's doing so with a family, with responsibilities, with a job, and that's what I've always tried to do is to take some of the information that I've gleaned over the years about stress management and turn it into very practical advice that everyday people can use. So I'm a householder. It's a kind of an Indian kind of yoga term to describe somebody who is trying to obtain enlightenment, trying to move down the path, but doing so as a regular person who has kids and a family and a job living in the real life. What they point out is a monk doesn't really, who's trying to do the same thing, doesn't have as many challenges if he doesn't have a family and he doesn't have kids to support and
Right.
and have to go to a job and maybe only has to meditate in a cave. There are not that many challenges to that life.
Right.
But the challenge of trying to maintain that equilibrium and live your life to the fullest, they respect and admire that. So my one sentence answer is, I'm a householder.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll be talking often, I'm sure, as I continue to lean on your video production expertise as we kind of delve more into that aspect on the website. And I appreciate your friendship and your time today.
Oh, it's really been a pleasure talking to you, Kelly, and I'd love to do it anytime.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, Kelly.